What's up, guys? It's Gigi here. Wanted to show you guys the front squat and why you should be doing the front squat. I remember thinking the front squat was stupid, and it's because I didn't know anything about lifting. And I just remember thinking, why would you want to do a squat when it's in the front of you? Because that's like so non-advantageous. But that's kind of the whole point of the front squat, right? That it's not supposed to be like really easy and really light and really fun. It's really meant to challenge you. So the lighting's really bad here because that one random light's going to stand in front of it. Looks like I got like a halo. But the front squat builds a ton of strength in your quads. It works on getting that upright posture. It gets you through full range of motion, either ass to the grass or below parallel, which a lot of people struggle with. And not to mention, you're working the front rack position, which is really important for your overhead press if you're in strongman. And upper back strength is something I didn't ever realize until I got into lifting that was so important for things like a squat. So the case for the front squat is that if you build up your front squat, you will build up your back squat. If you build up your front squat, you will have more strength for your strongman events. If you have a better front squat, you will be better at things like the Atlas stone over bar, Atlas stone onto a platform. You will be better at the deadlift. Think about your deadlift. The first portion of it is literally like a squat where you're down low. Whether you're pulling sumo or conventional, we are still looking at a lot of leg drive and a lot of quad work and a lot of upper back. So the front squat works all of that. Let's break down the front squat right now. All right, guys, so super important what I'm looking at there is making sure the bar is at chest height. I like it just about at the armpit. You don't want it higher or lower, or else you're either going to be trying to lift yourself into it or try to get too low. So make sure you're at that certain height and jack your elbows up high. It sounds silly, but if you exaggerate that initial movement, that will get you at a better point where you are actually having your elbow parallel with your shoulder. You've got those elbows up high and that bar is in that perfect position up against your neck. Set up. You're always going and driving out from the knees. I always think about knees and hips are going out at the same time, maybe the knees slightly before, not like a back squat, right? With the back squat, you're leading with the hips first. So we're watching the slow motion, the knees break first, then the hips, chest is tall, elbows remain in the same position the whole time. Now, in terms of stance, you'll see that I'm a little bit wider. I do have about 15, maybe a little bit more degree of foot flare. It has to be what is good for you. The front squat, really, you can get a lot more depth than a back squat, generally speaking. I have a bit of a butt wink there. That's something I'm still working through. But whenever you're focusing on your front squat, remember that you are trying to get below parallel. This is something that allows for a much better range. Work for your anatomy. Stand a little bit wider if you need to. Now, as we move on, this is going to be a bad front squat. You'll see, look at where my elbows are, all the way down there, and watch me go down. Boom, I fall forward. I have to throw myself back up. If we watch that in slow motion, we see the position is bad. I'm basically just gripping this in my hands. Absolutely no stability whatsoever in the upper back, rounding my low back, falling forward, and having to throw myself back up with as much force as possible. And this is with an empty bar. So you can imagine what this would look like with 135 pounds on the bar, let alone something even heavier like 200 pounds on the bar. So make sure you got your position right. All right, so now as we're moving on, we're gonna have those elbows up high. You can do a zombie squat with those arms high up, especially if you lack that shoulder range of motion. This is a great temporary solution, or the arms crossed over. Nonetheless, chest is tall, elbows are high. And I have still a little bit of a bad habit of looking up with my squat. I kind of noticed that now watching the video playback. You always want to look forward. If you start throwing your head down or your chin way up in the air, odds are you will fall forward. All right, guys, so a couple of things with the front squat. Things I didn't know that I have recently learned, or little tricks that I learned. One, when I started this video, I did not prime my shoulders at all. For someone who has bad shoulder mobility like myself, that hang shape doesn't come very naturally. I got a lot of limited range of motion, that internal rotation. Here at that external, once I kind of get to that point where, where your elbows are high, that jacked up point, I feel some tightness. So priming your shoulders, warming up your shoulders is super important. And I'll go into more detail about that in a different video, but priming your shoulders beforehand, very important. Number 2, I like exaggerating, jacking up my elbows. Obviously, when you're in a front squat, you don't need your elbows this high in the air, but when I'm prepping, I like to start myself at a really high point. So when I'm setting up on the bar, I'm literally jacking my elbows up as high as I can, left, right, wiggling under the bar. It reminds me a lot of a set up for a deadlift where you're trying to get as much of your body between you and the bar as possible. A lot of that leading with the knees, quote unquote. That's something that's like a cue that I like to use in my head to remind myself that when I'm starting a back squat, you're always leading with the hips. So you're sitting back into the squat. The front squat, you are sitting down, so slightly different. So for example, setting up for the front squat, I'll show you back squat first, I guess. What an ugly way to get into it. But when you're sitting for that back squat, you're here, digging that bar into your back, and my first thought always is driving my butt back, so big breath. Hips are back, I'm at that angle, and I'm sitting, I'm driving those knees out, second, third toes, keeping in contact with the bar, chest comes up tall. Front squat, other way around, we're gonna lead with the hips. We want to lead with those knees, driving outward with force. Good tactile feedback, be putting a band, mini band around your knees. Setting up, I like to jack my elbows up super dramatically high. I learned this from Jeff Nippard. And now I'm going to lead with the knees. So I get my setup, make sure I'm in solid contact with the floor, digging my heel and my big toe and my midfoot into the bar, creating the big arch, leading with the knees out first, and not the hips back, so knees out. You can kind of see that difference. If I led with my hips, I'd end like this, and that bar would fall right out. That's a horrible position. I'm kind of rounded, it'll look like garbage. When I lead with the knees, I can keep that arch a little bit better. Here I am way below parallel, no butt wink. Elbows are still pretty high, and I feel nice and strong. Obviously, this is the bar by itself, but really smart to be aware of where you're initiating your movement. So in terms of programming the front squat into your workout, I do think it is probably the #1 builder for your back squat. It's going to target the weak points of your squat, which is usually upper back. And not to mention, this is a huge exercise to build for your deadlift. I honestly think that including a front squat in deadlift day is a huge benefit for any, if you're doing a giant set, including it in there, including it in your assistance work, huge for upper back work. Because I think a lot of people have weakness in their deadlift from their upper back. They lose it. They don't have the lat strength. They don't have the upper back strength. They don't have the ability to stay stable and tight within that deadlift. And this front squat obviously forces you to be very stable, very engaged throughout the entire lift. So where would I program this in my own workout? I would put this in my assistance work for deadlift day. I would put this in my assistance work for squat day. I would do this is part of conditioning because it is very cardiorespiratory doing front squats for higher repetitions, lighter weight. I would not shy away from bumping up the weight on your front squat. I think in a given training cycle, you could definitely have the front squat be a main focus, especially for strongman, instead of the back squat. And that's something I'll kind of experiment with a little bit and see if building up that front squat has a ton of carryover, which I know it will, for things like the Atlas stone, a Husafel stone, the sandbag carries, all that stuff. Because you got to remember, every time you pick up that stone, every time you pick up a sandbag, you generally lap it first and pick it up like a front squat. So if you don't have that upper back stability and capability to breathe and brace and hold that weight as you lift up, you are going to fail in the actual standing portion. Most people can lap the Atlas stone, but they can't actually stand up with it. So that explosive power out of the hole from the bottom of that front squat, all of that stability in the upper back will be a huge benefit for anyone looking to build up upper back strength and for strongman.